Ray Langan is his name, and he's going to talk to us today about finding your career calling. So he's going to talk for about 30 minutes. Might have time for a quick Q&A at the end. And other than that, he has kindly said he'll hang around for a couple of minutes afterwards to answer maybe a couple of questions outside that people have. So ladies and gentlemen, will you give a lovely warm round of applause for our next speaker, Ray Langan, please.
Okay, so good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can I ask a quick question? How many of you are, let's say, career changers? So you're switching career. Anyone here looking for your first or second job early in your career? Okay, excellent. So I'm just going to jump straight in. So I'd like you to imagine standing over here, a gorgeous girl by the name of Shannon. And Shannon picks up her wheelbarrow, she goes to the edge of the shore, and she's standing on the edge of the shore, and out there is lots of black water. Think of the colour black. So she jumps on her boat, which has no oars, and because the boat has no oars, the man comes down and bans her from owning a boat. Now, who did I say is standing over here? Shannon, what does she pick up? Wheelbarrow. She goes to the edge of the shore. Out there is lots of black water, jumps in her boat with no oars, and then the man comes down and bans her from owning a boat. So we just learned 6 objects in 60 seconds, and we've just done a geography lesson. We just learned the 6 largest rivers in Ireland. So let's rewind back. The largest river in Ireland is the River Shannon. The next one is the River Barrow, not the wheelbarrow. The 3rd is the River Suir. 4th is the Blackwater. 5th is the River Orr, the River Nor, and 6th is the River Bann. So let's have a quick look. There we have the River Shannon, Barrow, Suir, Blackwater, Nor, and the River Bann. And that is an example. By the way, who found that easy? If you don't have your hand up right now, you've been very lazy. So, good afternoon. My name is Ray Langan, and that's an example of what I do. I show people how to learn faster, quicker, and better. And for the last 10 years, I've been delivering programs in study skills and leadership and well-being and cyberbullying. And my program is called Rayse the Game. And that's a metaphor for raising your standard or raising your performance. So I've been 10 years in the education sector and in that time I've probably been in over 200 schools. I've probably spoken to, I'd say, 50,000 students right up and down the schools of Ireland. And the reason I tell you that is not to impress you, but to impress upon you that what I've learned is you need 3 or 4 things to succeed when it comes to your career, when it comes to study, when it comes to learning, and when it comes to doing well in any discipline. And the first thing we need is a goal, something to focus towards. So in my programs, I help students set goals. And it is true that people who have written goals, they're more successful. So having an idea of where you want to go is really, really, really important. And hopefully on this presentation, I'm going to give you some ideas of where you'd like to go. The second thing you need is attitude. So attitude is a small thing that makes a big difference. And again, when I work with students, and my audience is typically teenagers, attitude is such a huge variable. And if you ask me the difference between people who succeed and people who don't, it's that word attitude. And to me, the attitude is really another name for hunger. So how much do you want it? So I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. When I'm in my study skills programs, I teach a methodology of how to study in 30 minutes. So, my methodology is really wrapped around how to make studying fun. I'm not going to get into that today. And the fourth thing you need to succeed is energy. Energy. So where does energy come from? Energy comes from diet, sleep, exercise, all those things. But for me, energy is when you make a decision. It's when you make your mind up that you're going to do things a little bit differently than you've done before. So I try to bring a lot of energy to my programs. And really for you guys, whether you're on the job, who's on the job search right now? But who's actually actively looking for work? Who is in a job but you want to get out of that job and find a new job? And you're hoping that your boss is not sitting right behind you, okay, as I say that. So again, I'm very, very, very lucky, and I'll tell you why. I remember the 25th of June, 2009, very, very, very well, for 2 reasons. The first one is this, and that is that, that was the day that Michael Jackson died. And I know there's a lot of controversy and there's the whole documentary recently and all that, but what I remember about that day very vividly was being really, really, really sad. And you know, when someone famous dies, you kind of go, oh yeah, okay. But I remember that day very, very particularly because I remember it was like part of your childhood dying. Because anyone who's around the 80s, he was the 80s. And I remember being really, really sad about that. The second reason I remember that day is that's the day my boss called me in, and I was working in an accounting job at the time, and he sat me down and he said, I'm going to let you go. And this was the time when the recession was really starting to kick in, and he said, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. He said, your talent is not in accounting. The next job you go for, do not stay within the accounting field. And you know what, it was like someone released me that day, because this was a career I'd been struggling in on and off for the best part of 10 years. So, you know, what I do remember is that it hurt really, 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 really a lot that day, but also there was a sense of release. So my question to you is, you know, what is paining you right now, and what is hurting you right now, and what do you want to be released from? Because often the work that we're doing, you know, you go into it for practical reasons. You know, the reason I went into accounting is because my parents and my dad, and I love my dad to bits, but this was the solid, the safe, secure kind of job. But when I was doing the BCom and UCD, and you came to specialize, I did not want to do accounting. I wanted to do marketing. So, you know, and that's because I'm very creative. So really what I'm going to do in this presentation is I'm going to give you a flavor of just some ideas of how I got to do what I do today, where I'm really, really, really lucky. Every day to me is fantastic, because I go into schools all over the country. I talk to young people. You know, this is my 12th presentation this week, and while on one hand, you know, I'm quite tired today, I'm also very lucky because I get to impact a lot of young people. So if you want to make impact, and if you want to make your life count, sometimes you got to do things a bit differently. Now, I talk a lot about anxiety in my programs, and I know for some of you, even thinking about changing career right now, it fills you with anxiety. But the first thing that you need in order to succeed, whether it is changing career or looking at a new job, is you need this. You need courage. And if you want to take a few notes here today, I'll actively encourage you to take some notes. But you do need courage. So, you know, where does courage come from? Well, courage is, to me, I like when I'm nervous. I like when I'm fearful, because that to me tells me that I'm about to do something. That to me shows me that you're living. So, you know, I always remember, you know, my first presentation, and it was really interesting. After I got let go from that job in 2009, and I was in the financial services area. So I was a qualified accountant. I was also a qualified financial advisor. I had my own brokerage at a certain point in the 2006, 2007. And I remember when it was around, it was Michael Jackson. That was June 2009. It was about 2 months later. And I literally had no job, no work. I was trying to sell, it was life insurance. And this was when, do you remember the Troika came into Ireland? The place was literally shutting down. I remember walking up O'Connell Street one night, and the guys were literally cleaning the streets, and I was thinking, are they going to get paid tomorrow? That's how bad things were at that particular point in time. So looking for work in 2009, I know some of you remember this very well, was difficult. But I was very lucky. I got a phone call from a friend of mine who I knew in the education sector. And he asked me, was I interested in, you know, trying out a couple of things. He was setting up a personal development division, getting into schools. And what I had done was I put a video on Facebook prior to that telling a story. It was just a simple story from a book I was reading over and over and over again. And I put this up onto Facebook. And I remember he had seen this, and he said, would you come on board with my company? Try it out for a month. And what I did was I hopped 50 boxes of journals and booklets in the back of the car and started driving into schools and knocking on doors. And that requires a certain amount of courage. So you have to get busy, you got to hustle, you got to start banging on doors. Also, when I first walked into a school, I had what's called imposter syndrome. Does anyone here know what imposter syndrome is? So imposter syndrome is where you literally, I know a lot of you feel that kind of thing of, you know, I'm totally different to everybody around me here. And then we set up a division in study skills. And suddenly I got trained up in study skills, so I was going into schools and I had to give my first seminar, which was nerve-wracking. How many people do not like public speaking? Okay, so there's probably about 3 people put their hand up because everyone else was too nervous to put your hand up, okay? Because it's difficult, right? So I remember the first presentation, and I knew I was going to have about 80 transition years, and you had to have your intro music. And this is where I made a big mistake. My intro music was the music to The Karate Kid, the 1980s version of that. Now, I thought that was a great movie, Daniel's son, the whole thing. To a kid in 2009 who's 14 years of age, they're just looking at you going, you are naff, okay, you are not. That just didn't. So this is when I learned very quickly that they're not entering my world, I have to enter their world. So it was so interesting, and I remember afterwards, that was the worst presentation I ever did. I didn't sleep for about a week. And but the great thing about that was, it actually gave me a huge amount of this, which was conviction. Because after that, I remember thinking, wow, how bad was that presentation? I cannot do that again. I decided to join Toastmasters. So is anyone here familiar with Toastmasters? Yeah? Actually, what I'd like is for a second, do you know what? My seminars, I usually bring a lot of energy to the room. And I feel I'm just talking here a little bit. Would you like to have a little bit of fun? Okay? So we're going to have a bit of fun. Normally what I do in my programs is I push people a little bit outside of their comfort zone. When you get pushed out of your comfort zone, you actually learn something. So I'm going to ask you to do something right now. And when you hear that little voice in your head that goes, what? Or do I have to? Or as a teenager would say, do I have to? I'm going to ask you to put that voice to one side, and I want the new, empowered, strong part of you to come through. Could I get everybody, please, just to stand up for a quick second? So just stand up, and just go with it, okay? So we're going to go with, just go with this. Trust me on this. We're going to have a little bit of fun. Just clear a little bit of space. Make sure you have a little bit of room. I just want everybody to put your hands up into the air. Stretch, 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 and give me a groan. Left-hand side stretch, give me an enthusiastic groan. Stretch over to your right-hand side stretch and let that groan out. Stretch down if you can, touch your toes, if not touch your knees. Come back up and everybody just jogging on the spot. That's about a 3. Shake it out, go to a 4. Go to a 5, go with it, go with it. I know you don't want to, keep going. Go to a 6. Now the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is very simple. Cuchulainn, when he went into battle, he was an Irish warrior. He had a war cry. It was the Irish word for victory, which is the word abu. So when I shout 3, 2, 1, Carja, what you're going to do right now, and this is going to weird some of you out, go with it. Turn to the person beside you right now. If you don't know them, it means you're talking to a stranger. Go with it. So get into pairs. So please turn to the person beside you. That means you can get into a 3. Don't have an odd person out, please. And what I'd like to do is look them in the eye right now. And when I say 3, 2, 1, Carja, you're going to shout at them the word abu as loud as you can. 3, 2, 1, Carja! Please sit down. Thank you. And I see some of you looking at me going, I should not have come to this talk. I've had to talk to a stranger, and now he's had me up and moving around. By the way, your number 1 asset is energy. Energy is your number 1 asset. Everything that I do, I ask myself a question, is this going to give me energy or take energy away? The quality of your life depends on the quality of your questions. So your biggest obstacle right now is not the jobs market, it's not the employers, it's not the sector, it's yourself. So what we need to do is to get control of our thinking, and where conviction comes from, it comes from pain. Conviction is great. This is where adversity is actually your number 1 friend. Being let go from that job put me in a very, very, very difficult situation, because prior to that, I'd set up a business 3 years beforehand, and for a while it had gone very well, and then a few things happened and the market crashed, and I found myself at that stage having set up a business in a seriously difficult financial situation. And the funny thing is, for anyone back in 2009, when you were in a lot of debt and the banks were coming calling, it actually makes you do things that you would not believe. So where conviction actually comes from, it's when you're pushed. It's when your back is to the wall. When we're too comfortable, we don't do things. So the second thing you have to do is to actually make yourself uncomfortable. That's why I moved you around there. So for me, conviction, the best thing ever to happen when I did that first presentation was it was a complete flop. Because the worst thing is, actually, adults are good. Adults are cool. They'll listen to you. They'll pretend to be interested. They'll nod with you. Some will even fall asleep. Teenagers don't do that. The worst thing is not when teenagers heckle you. It's not when they start throwing things at you. It's actually when they fall asleep, because then you know you're really bad. So out of that experience of a bad presentation, I actually joined Toastmasters, which is a fantastic organization to learn how to public speak. So communication is absolutely critical in all of this. So if you want to succeed in your career, learn to communicate. And there's two things that I would advise any person to do. The first is to actually master public speaking, or at least to put yourself in conditions where you have to get up and do a presentation. And here's why. You will get seen. You'll get seen either in your company, or you'll become visible, or you will actually be, because there will come a point in time where there will be a scenario where you have to give a presentation, but you don't want to be getting into that situation going, oh no, oh no, oh no. You want to be going into it going, yes, this is my opportunity. So communication is a key skill when finding your career calling. And the second skill that I would advise is learning how to sell. Learning how to sell. So for a lot of you, you might think, well, sales is kind of like, oh, salespeople, or, some people think of it as a dirty word, or we associate the Wolf of Wall Street and manipulation and all that type of thing. Well, actually, every person in this room is a salesperson. Who are you selling? You're selling yourself. So really, it's about selling yourself. It's about being able to, and the way I think of, whether you're in the jobs market, here's where people make the mistake. They actually come into an interview situation, and you think, I'm trying to sell myself and big myself up and all that stuff. If you think about it, an employer has some needs. They have critical tasks they need to get done. And your question is, how good am I at doing those tasks? How good am I at solving those problems? How good am I at working with people? Actually, is this company the right fit for me? So instead of coming into a job interview where you're hoping to get picked for the next round, or whether you're hoping to get through to the next interview, you're coming in with a different type of energy. So ask questions in a job interview. Actually come into it with equal energy, because if you've got confidence in yourself and you're able to communicate and you're able to sell yourself, and the first business I ever set up was in 2006. So I also had a financial services company at one stage called the Wealth Shop, and we set up a little shop, an actual shop. I remember you go to a health shop to improve your health, you come to the Wealth Shop to improve your wealth. And this was around the time the Celtic Tiger was absolutely booming. I had left the accounting field, and I remember we opened our first shop in the Omni Park shopping centre in Santry, not too far from here. And every day was like an episode of The Apprentice. And I remember thinking, well, if you can talk, you can sell. Actually, selling is a science. Really good salespeople ask good questions, and they find out your legitimate needs. And then you're asking, can I solve these needs? So, find out about the dialogue that's involved in sales. So, for myself, and again, I'm using myself as an example, and hopefully this is giving you some ideas of what you can do in your career. I went from a back office accountant to a frontline salesperson, and I learned so much out of doing that. So, even for some of you right now who are not in work, taking 2 or 3 months and going to a call center, that's a great idea, because you get really good with people very fast. And it's being able to, ask good questions. So asking good questions is critical. The next thing that I really speak about is clarity. So where does clarity come from? And, it's so interesting because This week, I was very lucky. This week, I got to do an amazing, I was very grateful, I got an amazing opportunity, which was to work in the Royal College of Surgeons with the first year medical students. And 20 years ago, I was actually in the College of Surgeons studying as a trainee chartered accountant. And I found those exams so difficult and so pressurized. Is there anyone doing exams right now? So, a couple of people. So, and I found it really, really difficult. The volume of the material, the pressure of the exams. And in my finals, I remember the first day going in and opening up the first paper, and it was auditing. And I can only describe it as, nowadays, I would describe it as a panic attack. I'm also a trainee counsellor and psychotherapist. I'm actually in lectures today, so I've had to nip out for an hour during lectures to come and do this presentation. But back then, I didn't know what a panic attack was. And I just remember the room getting smaller and smaller and smaller and not recognizing any of the questions on the paper. And it was just so stressful. And this week, I actually got to go back in and deliver my program. And it was really, really, really cool. But where the clarity comes from is really, if I was to give anyone advice, it's to try lots of things. You know, when I think back on my career of how I got from back office accountant to at one stage being in financial services as a broker, and today, you know, now being a teen therapist, an expert in accelerated learning, going into schools as a motivational and public speaker, it's because I've tried lots of stuff. And I don't see myself as the finished article. So we constantly, it's about putting yourself out of your comfort zone. And, you know, this thing of clarity, it's this process of trying things. There's an excellent book by a guy called Scott Adams, if anyone knows the Dilbert comics. And it's called something like How to Fail at Everything Until You Succeed. And he has an amazing formula. It's keep trying things, you fail at this thing, but now you're narrowing down what you're good at. You go to the next thing, you fail at something, and then you narrow down to the next thing that you're good at. So it's a narrowing process. So again, we keep going at things, and what starts to become clear then is what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. So every person in this room has strengths. You know what you're good at. Actually, turn to the person beside you and just ask them in a career context. And one thing I learned about myself is I like to communicate. I love to work with people, and I hate sitting at a desk. And I spent 8 years in accounting sitting at a desk. Turn to the person beside you and just ask them and how you work this out is what you don't like in work. So what do you not like about either the job that you're doing or the type of work that you're doing? Just turn to the person beside you and ask them now. Go. There's an excellent book. There's an excellent book called A Story Brand, and I'm big into, again, now a solopreneur and a business person, and that's one of the things. I always wanted my own business, and even when I think back to 20 odd years ago doing the Bachelor of Commerce degree in UCD, the reason I selected commerce was basically, actually I'll tell you, it was because I went to school close by here, just at O'Connell School, and in 5th year I was chosen with 3 guys to run the school shop. There was no such thing as transition year, and we sold paper and stationery and and there was 900 guys in the school. And that year we made a profit of 800 quid. Plus, at 8:30 in the morning, you could go somewhere and have a cup of tea and toast. So I was really lucky, especially when it was cold outside. So I learned retail. I learned how to budget, manage a business at the age of 16 or 17. And based on that one experience, I thought, I want to study business. I want to do something to do with business. And that's why when I went into Leaving Cert, I chose as my degree the BCom. So start to think about the things that you're interested in, because 20 odd years ago I could never have predicted where I would be today. I suppose when you are finding your career calling and you are trying lots of different things, and I encourage you, if you are in career transition, to try and give yourself the space of a year to try and make that move. So you have to set it up financially, and you have to try things out. You have to look at different jobs, and just to give yourself a little bit of space in order to do that. But it is about finding that peace and quiet, because often the thing that you're looking for, it's not in front of you. It's sneaking up behind you. And Steven Spielberg talks about this. He does a marvelous speech on, how often your passion, we hear that word passion over and over again. And I think it's one of those words that, if you said to me 20 years ago, what are you passionate about? I'd say, well, Liverpool and Oasis. So, and I'm still passionate about Liverpool, and I still like Oasis. So, but it is about, finding a bit of quiet time that, whether it's out for a run or meditation or a walk, and asking yourself, what am I really interested in? What do I do? How you spend your money, your time, your reading, watching TV, documentaries, they are giving you the clues of where you want to, where you want to place yourself. And I can only say this as somebody now, and the reason I'm doing counselling and psychotherapy, by the way, is because teen anxiety is such a huge issue now. And I get the phone call from moms and dads to help their sons or daughters around the whole area of anxiety. I launched a cyberbullying program last year, which took off for me. But in order to be able to talk about those areas, I need training. And that's where, when you find some quiet time, because if you want to create a compelling career that excites you, often it's behind you and it's around you, but it's only when you give yourself a little bit of quiet space and actually think about it, or maybe it's the things that people are asking you to do. What can you do better than anybody else? And it's asking yourself really, really, really good questions, finding a bit of quiet time, and often what you're looking for is right there all the time. So I really hope this, have you felt this has been of benefit? Yeah, hopefully you've got a few ideas. I'm just going to wrap up by saying a huge thank you to everybody for coming here this afternoon. Good luck on your search. Get excited about it. If you are career transitioning, get really excited. What you're looking for is out there. Sometimes it takes you 2 or 3 goes to get there. But when you do get there, as somebody who, is very excited about the work and the field that I'm in, it's amazing. And every day is not a work day. Every day is like a weekend day. I'm going to finish with this. Next time you cross the River Shannon, turn to the person beside you, name the 6 largest rivers, show them how intelligent you are, and the next thing, I'd like you to take your right hand, turn to the person on your right, give them a pat on the shoulder, say, well done, buddy, for making it through this presentation. Best of luck in your search. If anyone has any questions, I'll be available for the next 5 or 10 minutes, and I'd like to tell you, or suggest you, have a great weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Ray. I'm going to give you a quick bit of TV. Feel free to move on if you want a quick bit of TV insight. They deliberately make you walk up that steep flight of stairs when you're doing Dragon's Den, so that if you go in and you're super confident, you'll at least have the breath knocked out of you. And apparently it makes for more interesting viewing when people come up the stairs and it feels like their hearts are thumping because they're excited, but they're actually just wrecked from coming up the stairs.
And used to try and not fall up those
Well, there
stairs.
is that, yeah. And the other thing, and this is, you were talking about the feeling of excitement and nervousness. This is a scientific thing that I saw at a presentation. It was to encourage more women to go on the radio, as it happens. But this guy was saying that the feeling you get in your body when you're really nervous is the same as when you're really excited. It's just what your brain is telling you. So I sometimes try this when I'm on a flight and I'm a bit scared and I go, I'm just excited over the turbulence, I love it. But it does work in a working situation. If you're nervous about something, you just tell yourself, go into the toilet and say it. Say it into the mirror if you can find a loo on their own. And it really does work. And I'm a radio presenter 20 years. I still get nervous, so sometimes I just have to tell myself to get excited.
Love the nerve.
That was great, though. I really enjoyed that presentation. I know you put so much in there. So, ladies and gentlemen, can we give them a massive round of applause for that? Thank you so much, Ray.